Welcome to the 14th Ward Independent Democratic Club's 62nd annual meeting. Thank you. So we're here at Chatham College and want to thank Chatham for hosting us, but also they've got some rules that they've asked me to pass on. The first one is that they want to make sure everybody understands that the event is sponsored by 14th Ward Independent Democratic Club. Hello, all members, and to all of Mr. and Mrs. America and the ships at sea watching on the streaming. The use of Chatham University facilities for this event does not constitute an endorsement by the university. Chatham University does not endorse or oppose any candidate or organization in connection with this or any other campaign or election. I suppose that they mean for this, the board and officer election that we're holding today. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. I think Chatham University, even if they wanted to get involved, would have the good sense to know that this is a very independent club that doesn't like to be told what to do and wouldn't want to take that well from the university anyway.
Now, could you bring the mic a little closer?
I'd be happy to. So let's go through our business a little bit. So we have our board and officer elections, which I'd like to talk a little bit about. Those of you who have been members for a while know that we've done our voting by OPA vote for the last 5 years or so, and that's what we're going to be doing again today. So anyone who is a current voting member, and I think if you don't know, you're familiar with the time period before the endorsement meeting that you have to be a member. That doesn't apply for this election. So if you haven't updated your membership, you can do so today and still vote today on the board and officer elections. So you'll get a link in your email this afternoon, and between the time that the link goes out and 9 o'clock this evening, you can vote. We'll then close the election, count it up, and let everybody know what the result is.
What time will it close?
9 o'clock. It will close at 9 o'clock. Now, everybody on the board and the officers, like me and a few others, we all serve at the pleasure of the membership, all of you. And so I strongly encourage everyone, even though these are largely, well, not even largely, these are uncontested. There are as many people running as there are seats. But your voice is vitally important at this. We all do this for you. I am not a leader of this club. I am a servant of the members, and so are all of the other officers and board members. The seats that we have open now is a VP for the annual meeting. David Selden, who's been a board member for some time, is running for that, and I want to take this opportunity. Greg Kachansky has had that role for a while and is and he's the one who, along with his committee, have worked very hard to bring all of this together. And I heard the applause. Thank him a great deal for doing that. And so David will have big shoes to fill there, but I have absolute confidence that he will step into them and do an excellent job. The second is the VP, Vice President for Fundraising. Fundraising is absolutely vitally important to this organization because all of the things that we do, this meeting, Chatham did not give us this room for free. The endorsement meeting costs money. The mail that we send out to all the voters costs money, and so fundraising is vitally important. Michelle Feingold has been serving in that role for a while and has done an excellent job. Jeremy Kazaz now running for it. As a board member, Jeremy has perhaps been the hardest working person involved with this club over the last couple of years, and I am sure that he will bring that to this position, and I'll be excited to work with him in that position. We have the treasurer. Noel Walkington has been the treasurer of this club for as long as I've been involved and is absolutely key to, the VP for fundraising brings the money in. Noel makes sure it gets spent wisely, that we keep track of it, that we know exactly how much we have and what we can do. And I will be very, very happy to continue to work with him as treasurer. For secretary, you may know that I was previously secretary. We've had for some months an acting secretary, Janet Lundy. She has done a fantastic job bringing some sense and order to the absolutely terrible records that I left behind. And I will be very, very happy also to continue to work with her. All of our candidates for board members have been board members for some time, or have been officers who are stepping back to the board. Tracy Batten, Michelle Feingold, who I mentioned already, Julie Freeman, who is the grand parliamentarian for this club, Salim Khan, Greg Kachansky, who I also mentioned, and Joe Recht. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, but all of the people I've mentioned, I would be very happy to continue to work with in this club. And so I hope you'll take that into account when you vote today. So that's really our club business, apart from voting, which means that we're going to go on to talk with our speakers. Now, we have some folks going around. Fred's over here, David's over there. David, I think, also has some cards. With cards, anytime you have a question, Greg's got some here. Raise your hand, someone will come and bring you a card, and you can write it down. We'll bring it up. We'll ask as many as we can. I'd ask you to hold your applause or sort of other vocal expressions of feelings to the end so we can hear as much from our speakers as possible. We were thinking in setting this up about the 250th birthday, if you will, of the United States, which we date from the Declaration of Independence. And there are a lot of other dates you could conceivably date the birthday of the nation from, right? It could have been the time the First Continental Congress was convened. It could be the Battle of Yorktown. It could be the Boston Massacre. It could be the Treaty of Paris. We've chosen the Declaration of Independence, and I think, here's my hypothesis. The reason we chose that is because it contains the most centrally important and contested sentence in American history. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. And among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now that's been a statement that is delivered with questionable sincerity from the very beginning, considering it was written by someone who enslaved people. But the concept behind it has animated the best impulses, and opposition to it has animated the worst impulses of this country for the last 250 years. This is the contest in the United States Civil War. This is the contest in the suffrage movement. This is the contest in the civil rights movement. This is the contest that the people on the side of the rights of every person keep feeling we win and have never quite won. When I was a kid, I thought these questions were settled in some ways. At least the conceptual question, should every single human being be treated as equal under the laws of the United States? I don't think that that's settled anymore. I think that we still have the same fights that Lincoln had. We still have the same fights that Martin Luther King had. We have to fight these fights again and again. There's an old saying that I rather like, that you're not required to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. So we're going to hear from our speakers a bit about a number of things, but including the history and the present of, do we really believe that key sentence in American history? And what are we willing to do to change it from just an idea to a reality? First person we're going to hear from is Dr. Lisa Tatro, who's an associate professor of history at Carnegie Mellon University. She's a social historian, as is my sister, so I have a very soft spot for that, who writes about American democracy and the politics of memory, including this sort of memory that I talked about, this idea that there was an institutional memory that rights for all human beings had been won, that I was taught as a child and learned was not true, was not complete. She wrote a book called The Myth of Seneca Falls, Memory and Women's Suffrage Movement, 1848 to 1898, and is working on a new project that she's going to talk about, asking the question, who was demanding that voting rights specifically, something very near and dear to this club, be codified, be constitutionalized, and why did that not happen? Please welcome Dr. Lisa Tatro.
Hello, everyone. Start us off a timer here. Thanks to the 14th Ward Independent for the invitation. Thanks to all of you for joining us. It's really good to be in community. I refuse to believe that small d democracy is dead, and events like these are exactly what keep it alive. So thanks for the invitation, and thanks also for joining. I cannot get to my slide deck, which is over there on the little clicker. I didn't want to work, so we'll make this go as easily as we can. I spent a lot of time talking, sorry, I was showing that for the crowd. Yeah, we can go to the next one, that's fine. This is a headline from 2016, before Donald Trump was elected, from the UK Independent. American democracy for the second year running falls short of being a full democracy. And there are many reasons that's the case. I work specifically on voting rights, and that's something I want to talk about today, particularly as we approach the 250th, and we think about all the ways the Constitution has changed. What I'm going to talk about today is the way that it has stayed exactly the same, and the hazard of that for American democracy. Just skip those. Yep. What I'm going to do today is give you a bit of a constitutional lesson, and I promise it won't be painful, nor will it be especially legalese ridden. We're going to talk today about voting rights and also about this concept of equality and how it is that they get legally created and legally codified. So one of the things, if I were to ask you what's a basic right of citizenship, what might you answer? Voting, yeah. And why do you think you have a basic right of voting as your part of your citizenship? Like, what document extends that to you?
Voter registration. Voter registration.
That's a process that you engage in, but it wouldn't be the thing that would that says that you are allowed to register to vote. The Constitution, that's what we would think, obviously. What's interesting is that that is true in all constitutional democracies around the globe. There's about 180 of them. It is not true in the United States. When we created our Constitution, we did not include voting rights for citizens. In fact, you didn't have to be a citizen to vote until about the beginning of the 20th century. Voting was already happening in the colonies, and when the states declared independence, and there was a very loose confederation of a federal government, voting remained as a prerogative of the individual states, who wrote into their constitutions what the requirements were to be an eligible voter. That then becomes questioned at the Constitutional Convention about 10 years later. It becomes so controversial that it gets punted. The Founding Fathers just don't put anything in the Constitution about the voting rights of individuals, and certainly not about citizens. What's interesting to me is that that never happened. And people tried over time. Why, after 250 years, haven't we gotten that into the Constitution? And one of the things I'm going to talk about today, because some of you are probably thinking we did, right? We got the Voting Rights Act, we got the Women's Suffrage Amendment, we got the 15th Amendment. None of those things actually do that, and that's part of what I'm going to talk about today. By the time, the early requirement for voting in the colonies would have been property, but by the time we move into the 1820s and the 1830s, for complicated reasons, a lot of it having to do with the new crop of slavery and the expansion of enslavement, or the new crop of cotton, excuse me. Most state constitutions drop property requirements, which would have the main principle sort of at the founding for what states thought you ought to have. Certain residency requirements, age of 21, and you had to be white and male in many of the states. But this wasn't ubiquitously true at the founding. There were some states that allowed African Americans with property and women with property to vote. But by the 1820s or 30s, most states, we've moved to something called universal white male suffrage, and that means the disenfranchisement of many people who were voting, and white men now being the main requirement across the new states. Then comes the American Civil War, all right? We know that African Americans were trying to get their voting rights restored in many places. We know that a women's suffrage movement or a women's rights movement began before the American Civil War. But what those folks were trying to do, because nobody understood that you could do anything different, was not fight for a constitutional amendment. What they were trying to do was strike the word white or strike the word male, depending on which of those words was the obstacle for them to being able to access the franchise and go register to vote. So the American Civil War comes along, and two things come out of it. This is where we start to use the Constitution for voting. That comes out of the American Civil War, the federal Constitution. Right now, and even still today, who votes is in the state constitution. So after the American Civil War, we know that chattel slavery is officially ended in the United States, and we know that we are going to remain a union. But the question is, how are we going to come back together? And what is the status of 4 million newly freed people? This becomes a very complicated debate, but a variety of things emerge, and 3 constitutional amendments come out of this process, and they are arguably the most important constitutional amendments still to this day. And many people argue that this is in fact the second founding of the United States, that this is when the United States turns into a different kind of country with a different kind of agenda and a different kind of mission. Those words, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator. None of that's in the Constitution. There is nothing in the Constitution guaranteeing anyone equality. It is aspirational. And instead of arguing that they weren't sincere, I would argue one of the things we'll talk about today is that they understood equality differently. So equality has a very fungible, very spongy definition. It doesn't have a sort of platonic form that we're trying to achieve. And the question is, how are we going to breathe life into that? The 13th Amendment is passed by Congress, which is the ending of slavery. Does anyone know what else it says?
Except for imprisonment?
Except for punishment as a crime. Slavery can be practiced if it's punishment as for a crime. So what do you get? Mass incarceration, exactly. And then an enslaved population and chain gangs rebuild the South, which has been destroyed by American Civil War. We get the 14th Amendment, which is arguably the most important amendment for the modern rights revolution. Anyone know the 14th? Has many sections, only one of which is still operable, and that's the first section, which declares birthright citizenship. African American folks who have been born in this country are in fact citizens of this country, as one of the things that is settled. because this was an open question after Dred Scott, which had said African Americans can't be citizens of the United States. And after the war, Lincoln's Gettysburg Address is famous partly because what he says in that is, we are going to dedicate ourselves to a new birth of freedom. And the idea is that will be including African Americans fully and equally in the body politic, at least in the laws that we write. And that is a radical departure from an institution, a document that supported slavery prior to that. So the 14th Amendment does birthright citizenship, and also in the first section, it also says all citizens or all persons must receive equal treatment under the laws. This is the first time we get equality into the Constitution with massive ramifications. And it also says that you may not deprive people of their privileges of citizenship without due process of law. And this becomes the basis for many, many rights claims, which we'll get to in a little bit. Then comes the 15th Amendment. And the 15th Amendment, these are the three Reconstruction Amendments, says that African American men can vote. Many people say it's when African American men win their voting rights. This is the very first time that the United States Congress, we're about 100 years into US history at this point, and this is the very first time that the US Congress has ever taken up the voting rights of American citizens, because this is not a prerogative of the federal government, this is a prerogative of the state governments. But trying to get African Americans voting was very, very difficult because of the landscape on the ground, and one of the things they decided to do then is pass an amendment, which was very controversial. Many people said this was overstepping. I want to show you this version of the amendment, which was an early version. Okay, this was one of the versions that was proposed. It's not the version that passes, but let's look at this. The right of suffrage in the United States shall be based on citizenship. That's probably what many of you might assume you had. And shall be ruled by Congress, okay? Would take it away from the states, and all citizens, whether native or naturalized, shall enjoy this right equally. That is a voting right in a constitution. That does not pass. People have fought for getting this into the Constitution, but it never happens. What we get is this instead. This is the version that goes in. And it says the right of citizens of the United States to vote. So there, we now have that in the Constitution, that there is a right of citizens to vote. We'll come back to that. You might imagine who's been busily killing that, but we'll come back to that. Shall not be denied or abridged by any state, okay, on account of race. So all this does not give voting rights to African Americans or to African American men. In fact, they're not even in this amendment. What it does instead, quite contrasted with that other amendment, is it says the states may no longer use one thing as a qualification, and that is race. Oh, and Congress shall have the power to enforce, which is super important. Okay, next slide. So all that does then is erase the word male from all state constitutions. Oh, excuse me, white, I meant to say. I mean, it erases the word white from all constitutions. So now there is no obstacle for African American men to achieve the vote, but they have not been invested with the right to vote. Do you see the difference? The obstacle that faced them has been cleared. All right, so, but male remains, which means that's why women of color weren't voting. Okay. Black men begin voting en masse across the American South. This is an abomination, which is where most African Americans still live. This is an abomination to the white supremacist slave owners who find this to be a world turned upside down and a world that is dangerous and going to kill civilization. And they spend decades through vigilante violence and eventually writing new state constitutions to destroy this. Meanwhile, after the American Civil War, there's a group of women in the women's suffrage movement, which has been organized, who disagree about whether or not we should use the federal constitution to regulate voting, who decide they're going to start saying, okay, the 15th Amendment said the right of citizens to vote, so we must have the right, and we are citizens, according to the 14th Amendment, so we're going to go out and start voting. To act with this legislative process, we'll just do an end run around that and use the courts. I don't know why that's going So they start going out and voting to test the claim that citizens have a right to vote, as it said at the beginning of the 15th Amendment. And women go out, this is famously, some people may know that Susan B. Anthony gets arrested for voting, this is why. And not only white women do this, but black women across DC and other places do this as well. They go out and they start voting. And then want to get arrested and then take their cases to court and get the court to affirm that these amendments, in fact, have created a voting right for citizens. Guess who kills that notion? You could read the amendments that way, right? The right of citizens to vote, that there is a right. The Supreme Court says in Minor v. Happersett in 1875, which is one of these cases where women went out and voted on the idea that they had the right to vote, and it makes its way up to the United States Supreme Court. The United States Supreme Court, there is nothing in the Constitution that gives anyone a right of suffrage, and a right of suffrage is not something that citizens have in this country. And so it's perfectly fine for the states to abridge it based on sex. That has remained the consistent position of the United States Supreme Court. So these women then turn to a constitutional amendment strategy, and they first propose it as the 16th Amendment following the 15th, but by the time it's passed 50 years later, it becomes the 19th Amendment. Look at the language. The right of citizens to vote, it's exactly the same as the 15th. Shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. So you'll notice this amendment also gives no one the right to vote. What it does is it just says states can't use the word male. Are you with me? And Congress shall have the power to enforce. All right. So they're after this word now, but not. Their amendment, they could have written it to create a right. They don't. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. All right, by the time this wins, we get the familiar story, right? By the time this passes ratification in 1920, we get headlines like this. Suffrage wins, Tennessee ratifies, giving women of the entire nation vote this fall. Go to the next. Here's something from our documents.gov on the web. This is the Google. The 19th Amendment granted women the right to vote. It guarantees all American women the right to vote. No, it doesn't. We say this constantly, but look at the language. All it says is you may not deny voting on the basis of sex. That doesn't give anyone a right to vote. But we constantly talk about it this way, such that we're unaware of what's actually happening legally. So next, so now we've got the word male struck. So white and male are gone. But what's happened in the meantime by the 1890s is that those Southern supremacist former slaveholders have decided that, okay, Congress said we can't use the word race, we can't use the word white, but they never said that our power to erect requirements is null and void. States still have the power to erect requirements. They are just now regulated by the federal government not to use these two. Anything else they can use, so they do. So what we get is a massive game of whack-a-mole over the course of American history. And they start erecting poll taxes, they start erecting literacy tests. These are tested by African Americans in the United States Supreme Court as violating their right to vote. And the court says there is no right to vote. And they don't use the word race, so they don't violate the 15th Amendment. So what we get across history is this giant game of whack-a-mole. Social movement comes along, strikes down one criteria, thereby voting expands because people get access, and eventually a conservative movement comes along, erects new criteria that don't violate that one, and again engage in a massive game of voter disenfranchisement. Because we have never created a federal right to vote that people have, that the states may not abridge. We still let the states erect whatever criteria they want, and when they do that, they are not in violation of anyone's rights, because we don't have that right in our Constitution. But there have been efforts to create that, but we don't have a history of it, as I showed you with George Julian's amendment. Okay. So this is the reason you often hear many African-American women or Hispanic women couldn't vote after the 19th Amendment. It depended on what state you lived in. If you lived in a state that had erected poll tax and a literacy test, and you were being racially subject to that because they were, the registrar administered them, with a racial bent, even though they were supposed to be race neutral, then you couldn't vote. So. Then we get to the Voting Rights Act. Big triumphant right, gives us the right to vote. It's right there in the title of the Voting Rights Act. Do you know what the title of the Voting Rights Act is? an act to enforce the 15th Amendment. It's not exactly progress, right? It's, I mean, yay, Voting Rights Act, but also like 100 years later, we're finally enforcing the 15th Amendment. Because who had the right to enforce the 15th Amendment? Congress, right? Congress and the federal government are finally coming back and saying, you know, those states are probably violating the spirit of that. And all the Voting Rights Act does, I mean, not all, it's major, but it gives the federal government oversight over places with histories of racial discrimination, and it allows them to go in, appoint registrars, register people to vote, and also then to oversee those areas with something called preclearance, which is if those areas have a history of voting discrimination, they may not pass voting laws and voting restrictions without clearing them first with the Department of Justice, okay, to make sure that they're not racially exclusionary. If they are, then the Department of Justice will strike them down. In other words, you've been so discriminatory, you've lost the ability to have control over your own voting laws. And the DOJ strikes down a lot of racially discriminating voting laws. By the way, here's another example. When LBJ was debating what kind of thing he wanted to put forward for the Voting Rights Act, he and his Attorney General met on the side, and his Attorney General suggested that they forward a constitutional amendment to create a voting right so that the states couldn't keep erecting new and different criteria. So here's a new amendment that was proposed that never saw the light of day. The citizens of the United States, the right, shall not be abridged by the United States or by any state except for these reasons. Okay, so we've got residency, conviction of a felony, unless amnesty has been granted, mental incompetency or confinement. And that's it. And other than that, you can't restrict anyone's voting. That would have created a voting right that if the states had erected, for example, a voter ID law, that would have been in violation of this. It would have violated the right that one has. Do you see what I'm saying? We never do that. Okay. We have two more voting rights amendments. We call them voting rights amendments, but I suggest we call them voter access amendments. And those are the 24th and the 26th. The 24th is passed in 1964. And it says exactly the same language. This language is deadly because it leaves the prerogative with the states to create voting access and never invest our citizens with a right. The right of citizens of the United States to vote, which consistently I could name a string of the United States Supreme Court cases all the way down to Bush v. Gore, where the Supreme Court says the Constitution enfranchises no one and the Constitution contains no voting right for citizens of the United States. We do not have that in this country. That is the United States Supreme Court's official line and has been consistently from Minor v. Happersett down. States can't make you pay a poll tax or another tax. So this strikes down poll taxes. But again, what we get is a social movement striking down one thing, leaving the states with the power to erect any other thing that they want. Next slide. Here is the 26th Amendment. Same thing. The right of citizens to vote who are 18, age of older, shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state, and Congress shall have the power to enforce. That's what we have in our Constitution. That's it. We have never created a right to vote, and we are weird in that regard because all constitutional democracies invest their citizens with voting. We do not. We were one of the first. But what's been weird is that over the 250 years of our history, we never made that change. People tried, and one of the things we need to know more about is who were those people. But what people won consistently was striking down a state requirement using federal power, right? But leaving never creating a voting right in the federal Constitution and leaving the power to create voting eligibility requirements with the states. And that's where it resides today. The reason you can go register to vote is because you meet the criteria spelled out in your state constitution, not for any other reason. So one of the things I want to point out, and one of the reasons many people, and I would argue, is we've never created this, is that voter suppression is not an anomaly in our country. It is built into the system. The system has stayed stable legally so that voter suppression can happen. And this is exactly what happens as we get this game of whack-a-mole. Voting expands, conservative movement comes up with new idea to pass at the state level, passes it, voting sharply constricts, social movement comes along and strikes down that one thing. And we have this ongoing game over American history of just, this indefinitely. And it has been a story of expansion, contraction, all of which has been perfectly legal according to the United States Supreme Court. You may not know there is a movement afoot right now in the United States to try to create a constitutional right to vote. Mark Pocan of Wisconsin, our federal representative, he introduces the amendment every session. Goes nowhere. There was a project for a while to create a national right to vote amendment in the Democratic Party under Donna Brazile. Jesse Jackson Sr., Jesse Jackson Jr., they all fought with the Democratic Party to try to create a right to vote amendment. Most Americans would have no idea what that was because they assume they already have one. We don't. And that is part of why vote theft is a constantly legal phenomenon. Also, this particular political climate has been long in the making. And there are many, many ways in which democracy and voters, the suppression of democracy is built into our system. I mean, I'm teaching a whole class on that this semester, but I want to point out that the kind of takeover that started, that has now reached the federal government, began in the 2010s, well before Donald Trump entered the scene. And there was a big project in 2010, in the 2010s, called Project Red Map. How many of you guys have ever even heard of that? A few people? Yeah, so it was designed to capture state governments, turn them uniformly red, and then, because 2010 was the census year, then gerrymander the state. And the opening salvo of this, and also of corporate capture then of what the politics would look like of that state government with ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, and others, began here. And Scott Walker was many of you might remember when he kind of broke the unions and did a variety of other things, which he never ran on, and people were like, where is this coming from? And no one knew anything at this point still about the American Legislative Exchange Council, which is a bunch of corporations and billionaires who write legislation and then funnel it to state government. So in other words, they're the kind of puppet government behind. That was made possible also by the decision that year of Citizens United, which said that one can give unlimited funds to corporations, to campaigns. There's another case right now before the Supreme Court that is attempting to do the same. And then of course we got Shelby County v. Holder, which gutted the Voting Rights Act. It took away federal oversight of places. So for example, Texas had passed a racially biased voting ID law, and the DOJ had struck it down. 2 hours after the Shelby County decision, Texas put that law into place because the federal government lost its ability to stop states from doing that in this. There's now a case before the United States Supreme Court which is apparently going to just gut the Voting Rights Act altogether. I will close here. I have a lot to say about the 14th Amendment, but we're out of time. So, but we can talk about, let me just do one thing. I'm just gonna do one thing, just 2 slides. We are now also in an era where we are trying to go back to the idea of biological determinism. And pretty much anything you hear, ask yourself, it's all about biological determinism. And this has a long, long, long history in America. It goes with pro-slavery ideology, was about the idea that certain people just don't have the physical capacity for equality. So it's not discriminatory, it's just natural treatment, right? And this was also true about women. Okay, so let's go to just this slide. I just want to show you this. This is, during eugenics, there was a great book written called The Passing of the Great Race, all about eugenic ideas. And here is a review of it, and I just want to read this and then compare it to Project 2025, and I'll close there. So this review of it, this Yale review, this guy Grant, commenting on The Passing of the Great Race book, said that he demonstrates, the author of this book demonstrates a lesson of biology. That America is seriously endangering her future by making fetishes of equality, democracy, and universal education. Okay, do you see what the idea here is? The biology tells us it might be a nice idea to try to treat people equally, to have everyone participate in democracy, to try to educate, but biologically, not all people are capable of that, right? There are only certain people who are capable of that. So if you try to bring everyone in, you're just gonna corrupt the whole system. Go to the next one, which is Project 2025. Here's what they said. Project 2025 writes that many of the problems government programs are designed to solve, which would be welfare, universal education, all these things. But can't, and that phrase just doesn't mention biology but is resting on it, are actually problems created by crisis of the marriage and the family, right? That women are no longer in their proper sphere. Here are two graphs that show in 2016, people stopped asking about whether or not people thought men and women were more alike than different. Here you see now many Republican men, you can see, think that women need to return to their so-called traditional roles because that's what they're biologically fitted for. And if you go forward, one more, this is that the whole society has become too soft and feminine, and this is the idea that we've let women into voting. What they've done is tried to make everybody equal, and we know everybody can't be equal because that violates biology, although they don't say it. And therefore, the society has become too soft, and we need to get women out of the body politic, back in the home, and we need to kind of go back to, competition and not have DEI initiatives because we know those folks aren't properly fit, et cetera, et cetera. I will close there. But there is a bunch, this is straight up eugenics, y'all. It's just different language. So thanks very much.
Thank you. It's not the happiest place for us to be in this world where there is a mass movement against human equality. But it's where we are, and we have to face that. And we're going to hear a little bit from a couple of folks over here who are going to talk about practically how we push back against this, what you can think of as a eugenicist 21st century movement. We're going to start with Eugene DePascal, who you may have known as the Auditor General of Pennsylvania. Not the most high-profile statewide office, but he is also a congressional candidate, an adjunct professor of law at the University of Pittsburgh. Most centrally, for our purposes right now, is currently the chair of the Pennsylvania Democratic Party. So I'd like to invite Eugene DePascal to come up and talk a little bit about how to advance the cause of equality in the context of party politics.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Oh, we can do a little better than that. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We got about 8 months to save our republic here, so we got to get a little fired up about that. First of all, 250th anniversary we're coming up on it, so I think we should also talk about the historical context of me being here. I think I am the first time that we've had two distinguished titles speaking from this. Number one, the chair of the Democratic Party, and at the exact same time, a member of the Squirrel Hill Little League Hall of Fame. I don't know if we've ever had a speaker here who's had both of those distinctions at the exact same time. But now we have conquered that. I don't know which one I'm prouder of, by the way.
I know.
We could go over my 12-year-old batting average, but we'll do that some other time over beers. First of all, everyone, thank you for being here. Thank you, Professor, for the wonderful presentation. Thank you, Mayor, for being here as well. And most importantly, thank you to everyone for being here, for doing the hard blocking and tackling of our republic, of our democracy, of our Democratic Party as we set forth on this critical election year. It was last summer when I had this little bit of an unfortunate bicycle accident at an Ironman race. So I'm in the orthopedic office and I get a phone call from the Lieutenant Governor. I thought they were just calling to see how I was doing. Little did I know I should have pretended that my cell phone service wasn't working because he teed me up to, the governor wants to talk to you. We want you to consider taking over the state party. That's when I should have watched the movie Goodfellas and gone into the witness protection program. I then agree to do it, and state committee, for good or for bad, elects me as your chair. And then I get whispered, by the way, we can't make payroll in 2 weeks. I get to see the polling on the Supreme Court race. We are tied at 32 on the yes-no retention. And I'm like, what in God's name did I sign up for? And I knew instinctively, just even from my own loss as Attorney General in 2024, and thank you all for your tremendous support in that campaign, that two things had to happen for us to regain power. Number one is Trump had to do what we all knew he was capable of doing. That was further divide, further inflame, and further erode our country. And secondly, we had to come up with ideas to battle that. Together, last year, we came together beautifully, all of us, in the Yes No campaign. We knew Jeff Yass and the Commonwealth partners were injecting, we all got those mailers, they saw the TV ads, and they were turning that into a partisan election for the first time in Pennsylvania history. And we beat that back by over 20 percentage points, in large part because of people like you in this audience. So please, give yourselves a round. Specifically in Allegheny County, we did perhaps almost to historic levels. There were about 900 races where there was a Republican and a Democrat on the ballot. About 900. I think it's like 896. Anyone here know how many of those races? And Ben Forstate, who's here, cannot answer this because Ben's the map guy. He'll know this. He's gone legit now. He's on the public side now. But that was before he went legit. He would know this number. Anyone know how many of those races were actually won by Republicans in Allegheny County?
10.
If you come at 10 plus 1, get you the answer. It's 11. 11. 11 out of almost 900 races. And we won all over the place. We won a DA's race in Bucks County for the first time since the Civil War. We had a sheriff candidate, by the way, Danny Seisler, we're going to have him speak at state committee, who ran for sheriff on the platform in Bucks County, the swingiest of swing counties, on a platform of defeating the incumbent sheriff because of that sheriff's agreement with ICE. And he won that race by 10 percentage points. And I still find this one the most amazing statistic. Clearfield County, now when you run statewide, you know all these places, but some of you may not know Clearfield County that well. Clearfield County was a Trump plus 52 county. 52. And we defeated the incumbent district attorney in an open race for judge with a real Democrat who ran as a real Democrat who won that race. Granted by less than 1 percentage point, but flipped a Trump plus 52 county to win a judicial race. That's what we did last year as the Pennsylvania Democratic Party. So that gives us a lot of momentum heading into this year. And we've got an incredibly popular governor, incredibly popular lieutenant governor. They are running a campaign against them. I'm very confident that the governor is going to win, but we cannot take anything for granted. What I also want to stress to each of you here, Pennsylvania, because of some of the stuff that the professor talked about, how they've gerrymandered, all of the things that we are aware of that's happening in this country, Pennsylvania is the reason we are going to flip the United States Congress from red to blue. Northeastern Pennsylvania, the Lehigh Valley, Central Pennsylvania, where it's particularly going to matter to me that we sent Scott Perry finally packing, and in Bucks County. We are going to go 4 for 4. We're going to flip the United States Congress. And when that happens, legislatively, we are going to make Donald Trump, we are going to make Donald Trump a lame duck president. And you need look no further than the past week as to why that really matters. What has happened in Minneapolis and Minneapolis region is beyond a human tragedy. I mean, we had a race last night in Texas State Senate race. Trump carried the district by 17 points. Now, it was not a ruby red rural district, but it was a red suburban district. Trump carried it by 17. The Democrat won the Senate district last night by about 13 points. It's a 30 point swing. He won election day because there was the vote in mail, there's the early vote in Texas, and then the actual election day. A lot of times we do worse on election day. He won election day by 38 percentage points. Folks, I don't have to be, a rocket scientist. I'm a lawyer, I'm not an engineer, even though we're close to Carnegie Mellon. Average, everyday Americans, not talking about who's yelling on social media. Average, everyday Americans, lo and behold, don't like Americans getting exterminated in the middle of streets for exercising their constitutional rights, and they don't like what they see in the X-Files or the Epstein files. They don't like, they maybe like the X-Files, but they didn't. They don't like what they see in the Epstein files. They don't like what's happening with prices, and they don't like the chaos of the Trump administration. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is, because look, this is a former college football player in me, you can't underestimate your opponent. They have literally $1 gazillion to spend. I mean, the RNC, all these committees that they have, we got to just brace for this. This is coming. They have borderline unlimited money. Okay? We just have to know that's coming. We have to do our part to ignore the things we can't control and to focus on what we can control. If you can give $10 or $20 or more to some of our congressional candidates, do it. If you can get out there and knock on doors in the general election to boost turnout for the governor and our other races locally, but particularly in November, particularly when it comes to some of these congressional races, if you can go out to other parts of the state and knock on doors, or knock on doors for some of our key state house and state senate races, we have the ability this year to do something we have not done in over 2 generations in Pennsylvania. That is win the trifecta. That is have a governor, state senate, state house be Democratic, flip United States Congress, make Donald Trump a lame duck, and give Governor Shapiro the legislature he needs to pass the legislation we need to make Pennsylvania an even greater place. Thank you very much.
The mayor's already standing, so I'll be very quick.
I can sit back.
Eugene gave us a great sense of the party politics, but sometimes when you engage in party politics, something terrible happens and you win. I think probably everybody here knows who Corey O'Connor is, most of you probably personally. But recently he is also Mayor O'Connor. And I think he's been spending a bunch of the time since he took office finding out that when you pull the snow plows out of the garage, the wheels fall off. But that's not what we invited him here to talk about. We invited him here to talk about what can be done by elected officials locally, like the mayor, by elected officials throughout the state, in order to push back on the federal abuses that we've been seeing in Minneapolis, in Chicago, in Maine, where apparently, they'll send a bunch of people, but if you're Susan Collins, you can make a deal and they'll leave. What can we do locally through our local governments to address these? Mr. Mayor, please.
All right, thank you. That was my favorite intro, so I'm not going to get any questions about snow. Is that correct? Thank you. I need a break.
That's not correct.
I get it, it snowed, I know. No, I really want to I'll be brief because I know you guys have questions, but I think what we've seen over the last few weeks is important for cities like ours to stand together and band together. We have nominated a chief of police and a public safety director who, with my lead, we are not going to partner with organizations like ICE. We have been working, unfortunately, because of the snow this past week. I was unable to go to the U.S. Conference of Mayors, but when we did see issues like what happened in Minneapolis. We are part of the Democratic Mayors Association of the United States, and Mayor Bibb in Cleveland is actually the chair. And he got an immediate call from me to say, how are we banding together to help? And they put out statements, and I think having organizations like that, Democratic mayors being on the same page to rally nationally. Now, obviously that incident didn't happen in Pittsburgh, but we understand the ramifications that it does have on other mayors and what they're seeing and how they're combating the chaos that Donald Trump is putting into our streets each and every week at this point. It's scary for all of us. And it's not only ICE. I mean, they are talking about taking away our basic rights that we have fought for a very long time in the Democratic Party, and they are trying to stop those. And I think having an organization that we all can collectively, at least from my perspective, talk to about issues that are going on and being on the same page nationally will help us win these battles. Because we know that at the urban core, we control a lot of votes. But after that, how do we get out to the suburbs and the areas that are just outside of us and explain why these things are bad for each and every region? And we know, look, the city is the heart of Western Pennsylvania. It impacts people that live in Beaver and Butler County. And the things that are happening here, we want to amplify so that they understand that what happens in Washington is going to affect them as well. And that's the type of thing that we have to talk about. And we are going to be successful this fall. For us, it's not just about winning the governor's race. Yes, that's really important. It's the smaller races that really impact our lives in Pittsburgh. Imagine if we could finally get control of the state Senate. How many bills can we pass? Yeah. How many bills can we pass that we know will impact our residents immediately? When we fought, and I see Councilwoman Strasburger here, when we fought for paid sick leave, if we had a state Senate and House that thought the same way, we would have had to wait 2 years and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to change that law. When we fought to have common sense gun laws in our cities, or at least give cities the opportunity to fight for common sense gun laws, we need a state Senate that will do that, and we are only a couple of seats away. That is the momentum that we need leading up to the fall, because we know the governor is going to do a great job of leading our ticket, but it's now up to us. We understand the city is going to be very heavily Democratic, but anything that we can do to go out to the suburbs, and being the county controller just a couple years back, we saw that Allegheny County, in areas that used to be red, are purple, if not blue at this point. So we have to now not only get our message out there, but now it's on us to start governing to show people that Democratic leaders know what we're doing. We're going to protect your rights, but we're also going to provide opportunities to create jobs, to create wealth, to create housing where it's not just for renters, it's for home ownership in neighborhoods that haven't seen it in generations. Because home ownership is the key to growing generational wealth in a lot of neighborhoods in Pittsburgh that have not seen it in a very, very long time. That's why we were out in the streets talking about a Main and Main program, where we can reinvent business districts and corridors that need density, that need entrepreneurs to start their first businesses. And those are the questions that we are going to ask, and those are our proposals when we go up to, I'm actually going to Harrisburg on Tuesday for the governor's address. You okay? Yeah, all right. He said he wasn't wearing shoes. Don't slip, okay? You're all right, okay. But when we go to the State House, let's not just ask for money that's going to bridge gaps in projects that we know the developer can already do. We can do some of those internally. Let's go up to the state and ask for $10 million so that I can get sites shovel ready in a neighborhood that has no development right now. The community organizations don't have the capital to do the shovel ready sites that we need. Those are the types of things that are going to impact our cities, but we haven't asked those questions in a very long time, which is why it's great to have such great leadership at the state level, because now we can do those types of things in Pittsburgh again. And when you're talking about these races coming up, we don't just want to win. As Eugene said, if you're turning state house or congressional races that were, what was it, plus 58 for Trump, we know that his message is not going anywhere. We even know people are leaving his message at this point. But now it's our job to get them back into our party again and believing in the Democratic Party and having cities and mayors combined across this country speaking in the same language is going to go a very, very long way. And that's what we're committed to do in Pittsburgh. I know this group very well. You're committed to doing this, and I know this group is not afraid to go out in neighborhoods and suburban neighborhoods where we might have lost before to talk to those residents. And that's the one thing that I will say we do better than anybody. And Eugene mentioned, day of voting. Our day of voting usually is very, very good. But now we need bodies to get that message out to neighbors because we are passionate. We understand what's at risk in this election. And that's why we're so committed to coming to the 14th Ward, to talking to you about how we are going to support you, not just with capital, but with our own voices to amplify your message to places that haven't heard it in a very long time. That's the Democratic Party. That's why we're going to win. And that's why I'm here to thank each and every one of you for all your support over the years. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna come sit over here so that we can all feel a little more relaxed, but I'm afraid that everybody else is gonna have to share a microphone. So, I'm gonna start with my own question. That's the prerogative of the position. Professor Tatro, you talked a bit about voting rights guaranteed in state constitutions. And Pennsylvania has voting rights that are guaranteed within it. There's
Guaranteed, what do you mean by guaranteed?
there is a voting rights section of the Pennsylvania Constitution.
Correct.
Right. So I suppose the question really is the guarantee. We've talked a lot about how the federal amendments in some cases protect people from state voter suppression. What can we expect, if anything, state constitutions to do in the event of federal voter suppression?
So there is a movement to try to argue that state constitutions do protect voting rights. Part of what happens is that we have this slippage of language, that we know that there is a voter rights, we call it a voter rights clause in the Pennsylvania Constitution, and with any state they have a voting rights clause. But really that is not investing people with voting rights. We call it voting rights, but really what it does is just spell out what the eligibility requirements are in that state to vote. So really what it is voter eligibility clauses. And what people have is voting access if they can clear those eligibility requirements. If they can't clear those eligibility requirements, then they cannot access the ballot. And we call that my right to vote, or my right to vote being suppressed, or my right to vote being taken away. There is no right to vote. There is nothing guaranteeing people. I mean, if you meet those requirements, then you should not have your voting, you shouldn't, right? If you meet the requirements, you can vote. But again, that's not because you have a right, it's because you meet the requirements. Do you see? And so the only way we can stop the state from erecting requirements that are getting in the way of people is to either create a right to vote that the states can't suppress, or create one at the federal level that the states aren't allowed to suppress. Right now, the states can erect whatever requirements they want for voting. Nobody has a right. Does that make sense? We talk about voting rights all the time, and we talk about my constitutional voting right, but the Supreme Court has been very clear no such thing exists. That's why you can erect a voter ID law. That's why you can erect whatever you want to do, because we let the states be in charge of that. And we've never created a right that the states might be abridging. I know it's very confusing. He looks so confused.
But given that, I guess the follow-up question I have is for the mayor and for Eugene. The question is it useful for us to talk about voting rights as if they exist, even if we know that they don't?
I think so.
do we talk about how somebody could challenge it? Is that what you're saying? Or your question, I mean, we want everybody to vote. So I mean, I think for our standpoint, you know, that's why unfortunately, especially in presidential years, you see how the Ds have, you know, we have so many lawyers that are sitting around ready to fight or object or go to court. So, I mean, it's a shame that we have to do that on so many levels. But I think, yeah, we need to tell everybody that they have a right, and we want you to be registered. We want you to get out and vote. We'll do everything we can to make sure that your vote counts. And I think, you know, that's why there's a lot of prep behind the scenes. And, you know, most in this room probably already have seen this before, but especially on presidential days, you know, if I walked in, even when my former job as the controller, if I walked in to just pay somebody that was working the polls, you would have somebody from the other side saying, you're not allowed in there. It's like, well, no, I am. You know, I think we have to always be prepared for people that are gonna fight our votes, and we know where they usually fight. They usually fight urban votes, and that's the biggest problem that we have. But having lawyers and everything set up and ready to go on election day, too often we have to be prepared for it because we know we're gonna get a challenge somewhere across the country.
One example I can think of, and I think to the professor's point, there are barriers that have been put up to vote in probably every state in the country.
Yeah.
Okay? Most of those, if not all of them, I don't like, but they are there and they are the law. One of them is, in Pennsylvania's vote by mail, this date requirement. Now, to me, I think, I'm just talking about me as a human, I think it's absurd that if you get your mail ballot in on time, but you mistakenly wrote your kid's birthday as the date, and not the date it was submitted, and then they go to court to try to throw that ballot out, to me, that is absurd. I'm just me as a small d Democrat having said that, okay? Feel free to. But it is the law, and however our Supreme Court has been somewhat loose in that, as a political party, our job is to educate voters on that provision, however stupid it may be, to make sure it is as accurate as humanly possible when that ballot gets submitted. So one of the things we try to, again, I want to be clear, like, I think that is a stupid requirement, but it is, to the professor's point, a requirement. So our job as a party is to educate voters about that so that they don't make that mistake and give the other side the ability to try to throw that ballot out. It's stuff like that that we need to do as a party.
I do think the idea that I have a right to say something in this democracy and my voice should be heard and my voice should not be suppressed has been an enormously powerful force in American history and an enormously positive one. It's part of why we're all here, right? And I just mean to highlight that we would have perhaps a lot more legal leverage if we could claim that our right was being abridged and we actually had one.
Oh, that's right.
That's the only thing I'm trying to point out here, right? Is that you could go and say this voter ID law abridges my right to vote. If I had a right to vote, I would have a stronger legal case. And so, yes, we have all these requirements, and
Yes, to the professor's point, yeah.
if we could claim we had a right that was being abridged, we might have a way to get these requirements out of the way, and also so that new ones don't come along, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, this is nerd law part, but when we claim to win the battle on this,
Yeah.
we try to claim it on an equal protection, but not on a
14th
vote.
Amendment.
We try to win it on a 14th Amendment
Yeah.
or on a Pennsylvania constitutional provision, but we never actually go back to a constitutional provision on the right to vote, because you're right,
Right.
it's not actually there.
Yes.
Has there historically, you talked about the vote as a voice, which I think is, it's commonly said. Has there been a tradition of regarding a right to vote as a First Amendment right?
I'm not a legal historian. I mean, I'm becoming a legal historian, but I'll let Eugene answer that one. I have not heard of a First Amendment claim to a right to vote. 14th Amendment is the place where it's commonly, and that's where we get one person, one vote, is from the 14th Amendment. But do you know?
Yeah, the short answer is no. 14th, 19th, and 26th
Yeah.
are the constitutional provisions.
15th.
I'm sorry, the 15th,
Yeah.
where we use on these issues, but we never actually go back to the original text because it's not there.
Yeah, exactly.
With the original Bill of Rights.
Right, yeah.
This says a question for Eugene, but I think this may be a question for everybody, really. There's an idea out there that the next election will involve a lot of efforts to suppress voters in a sort of a physical way, in a, having people being threatening in the streets or actually taking physical action. What are we doing, what can we do to get in front of that possibility and prevent it?
First of all, I think there's a chance that this is coming. I don't want to like alarm anyone. I think they'll pick their spots.
Yeah, that's what I think.
I don't think you're gonna, I mean, there's just not enough people in the United States for them to do this in every single part of the country. It's not possible. And there's some parts of the United States, they try to pull it off there in for a rude awakening. I shouldn't even joke about that, but I know it'd be a bad idea in some parts for them to try to pull this off. But big picture, the best way to defeat any of that business is to get as many mail-in ballots in. In Pennsylvania, like we have this incredible tool called mail-in voting. There simply is, if that ballot is submitted correctly and it's mailed in or dropped off at the drop box, that gets away any type of suppression they try to do on election day.
Oh, I mean, I would just say, for us, from the local side, making sure that all centers are safe for when you vote. So for us, it's looking with intel at any type of social media, any hits that we get that something's occurring. We have the right as the city to make sure that those locations are safe and make sure everybody's safe and has the ability and the access to do it. So from a local side, we do monitor all of those things on election day. What's happening, what's going to happen, where are some locations that they're talking about. So for us, it's also being proactive so that people feel secure when they're going in there and there's a buffer in case somebody's standing out there. And look, they have every right to yell and scream when somebody's walking in, but they have to give them access. So it's also local level all over the country to make sure that it's safe.
I think, we can all serve as observers and election watchers too, and that's really important, particularly in communities that are poorer or that are through, legacies of segregation, also areas of color, because the place where this happens mostly is where people are most vulnerable, so.
The polling locations in Pennsylvania are run by the counties. Has the city been working with Allegheny County on any kind of joint plan?
I mean, obviously there would be if there is some intel that we get from the county to say this location has been reported. Then it goes down to public safety. Our public safety director, our chief, what we need outside of these locations so that they are secure. I know a lot of the times, especially in Squirrel Hill, synagogues during elections, we always have extra security there, and some locations you have to scan in before you go. So, I think doing small things like that, but also if need be, not that we want to have that presence, but if we know that something's happening, and it usually happens during a presidential. So primaries, usually that doesn't occur, but for a general, yeah, you're on high alert for those things.
I think I'm going to expand this question a little bit. It says, what does not cooperating with ICE mean exactly? But I think I want to ask more generally, if we see, federal employees coming into Pittsburgh or to other parts of Pennsylvania, acting in a way that is inconsistent with the rights of Pennsylvanians, what options do the cities and the state have?
Yeah, so for us, obviously, no cooperation. So if somebody is, if they reach out for support on some issue, city will not do anything about that. Usually what would occur, and it hasn't to my knowledge yet since I've been in office, what would happen is, an ICE officer shows up at somebody's street. We would probably get a 911 call from a resident who's concerned. Our officer would be there to protect residents outside of that situation. And I think it's it's actually beneficial to cities to tell people that we will not cooperate. And here's why I always say it that way. Because what we have seen, if you are waiting on a visa, if you have an issue with immigration at all, right now you are afraid to call 911 for an emergency. That cannot be. Our job in Pittsburgh is to protect every single resident. I want you to call 911. I want you to call an ambulance. Right now, if cities say that they are cooperating, people are afraid to do that. That's why mayors have to take a lead and come out in front and say, we will not cooperate. So when you call 911, we are there to help you. When you're in our city for an hour, a minute, a year, 5 years, doesn't matter. You are in the regulations of the city of Pittsburgh. We are here to protect you. So by us coming out saying there's no cooperation, we hope that it makes people who have questions about calling 911 for safety, that it disavows that notion that we are going to have any call with ICE at all. And cities have to be aggressive in doing those types of things.
Question?
Yeah.
So you said,
Oh, sorry.
You said that, say that if there's a 911 call, the city, unit would show up to protect the other kind of folks there. Are they going to engage with, say ICE then approaches and tries to arrest me for filming? Are the police going to protect me, or are they going to stand down and let ICE?
so
Yeah,
what does
so,
that mean?
so legally it's a hypothetical that we can't,
Not so
well,
hypothetical.
so it's hypothetical because
Will they
if we get,
engage
they
or
will
they
not,
want to
they will
just-
not engage. I
Okay,
mean,
that's my question.
there's no engagement from us. Our job is to protect the residents. Obviously, if a situation gets out of hand like it obviously can, as we've seen, then it's just the matter of what's going on and what the officer is
But the
doing.
officers will.
But the officer needs to make sure everybody is safe on site. That is our rules. We've gotten a lot of hypotheticals, and we can't say for certain hypothetical what could happen. But also, when there is, like yesterday, there was a rally. Our officers were there to make sure that everybody was safe. When you have your freedom to speak and you have your ability to protest in our streets, we want to make sure that that is a safe location for you. And those are the types of things that our officers will do. And yes, we probably will get a 911 call. We have to get there and make sure that incidents occur or don't occur like they did in Minnesota. That's got to be our job. And our police chief has that sentiment. Our public safety director has that sentiment. They just talked publicly for about 4 hours at city council the other day, how they would step in and try to solve the problem at that time. Yeah. Sorry.
Well, one thing to add to this, and that is, and I've heard this a lot because Donald Trump can pardon people at the federal level.
Yeah.
It's important to state that he can only pardon people for federal offenses. So anybody that violates a state or local law can be held accountable for violating that state or local law. So it's just to be, nobody has a right to break the law. They may get away with it at the federal level because Trump can pardon them, but they don't get away with it at the state and local level.
This question, I'm going to expand this one again a little bit, I think. So what happens to federal funding when we don't help ICE? And I think the sort of expansive way I want to ask that is, how far are we willing to go to stand up to these kinds of abuses?
I mean, I'm willing to go all the way. I mean, I think if you look at the federal funding that's been cut, over the years, we've had to tighten our belts to make sure that we put out a good product for our residents. But I'm not going to jeopardize what I think that what's being violated right now by ICE. Those are people's human rights. I am not willing to jeopardize a $4 million grant for that. So if that's where it goes.
You are willing.
Oh, I am willing, sorry.
You
Sorry.
guys gonna
It's been
say
a
I'm
long
not sure
day.
you meant to say
Sorry.
that that way.
Sorry. I am willing, sorry. Thank you. That's why it's good to sit between two professors here and a lawyer. But yeah, I believe that if you're gonna take away $4 million or $10 million, I think the people of Pittsburgh want their rights protected before we ever get into a conversation about working with ICE. And that's my stance. Obviously, I'm only one vote there. I am the mayor and I say that, but council would probably have my support, or would probably support me in this, because it's inhumane what's happening. And we can't do that. And I'm glad I have the CMU professor. Everybody at least knew what I was talking about, right? Okay. I went to Central. I'm struggling. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the case. We have to do what we believe is right and what we know is right. And other cities are doing the same thing. So if you're going to take away our funding, okay, you're the big tough guy that took away our funding. Our residents want to be safe, and that's our job.
Well, as a Peabody grad, at least your high school's still there. I think I might close up with this one. This is a sort of a bigger, longer term question. And I'm going to, of course, alter it a little bit because that seems to be what I do. But this is someone's talking about a panel that they saw arguing for the need for a fresh start by writing a new constitution that addresses the ambiguities and other problems with the current constitution. We're, 230 whatever years since our last constitutional convention. Is it time for a new one? And if so, what would that look like?
And yours.
So this is a really interesting question. And I'm not going to weigh in on whether it is or it isn't, but I will say there's a big conservative movement afoot to have a constitutional convention and rewrite the Constitution. There's a massive, well-funded corporate and Republican organization, and they're arguing that we need to have a constitutional convention and that we need to rewrite the Constitution. Because we've never had one, the mechanisms by which approval, because enough states have to approve the holding of one. There has been an attempt to have these in the past, for example, to oppose segregation. There was an attempt to call a constitutional convention. In some of those cases, state legislatures approved calling a federal constitutional convention. This organization that is trying to call one now is arguing that that is an affirmative vote that counts now. So they are claiming they already have so many states that have already voted to have a constitutional convention, and they only need a handful more. And they are very close to being able to call one. And it's unclear what that would involve or what that would entail, but I would say that the move to rewrite the Constitution right now is being actively pursued by and largely unseen by very deeply conservative forces. And that is a source of great concern for me.
There are some things I think are more interesting and idealistic in an academic setting, and this would be one. And I think in practice, this would be a disaster.
Yes, but it's being,
There is an attempt to do this. I would just say that count me as one that thinks it's a horrible idea.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing is, what's in the document is useful if we have people who invest it with the kind of meaning that we need. I just think it's a question of fighting over how are we going to invest this document with the particular intent that we desire as democratic citizens. So.
It's been quite a long time since we've amended the Constitution.
It has.
Is amendment a more appealing option than a convention?
For me, it would be. I mean, I don't think a constitutional convention in this political climate is going to turn out in ways that I, as a citizen, would like. And amending, many people argue the amendment process is dead. I guess whether or not it's worth amending depends on what we're amending it to do. So I'm not quite sure, but.
Yeah, to me, actually, the amendment process not only is more preferred, but the fact that one hasn't happened in so long goes to show you how tough it would be to actually have a meaningful and positive actual constitutional convention. Because if we can't get some of these amendments that I don't even think are that overly controversial done, imagine what it's like if we actually had a constitutional convention. But yes, coming back to, we actually have, however imperfect the document is, and our Constitution is both great and imperfect at the exact same time. However imperfect it is, they created the amendment process for a reason. They knew at the founding that society was going to change, and they gave us the tools to change that document. We just need to actually have the courage to do it.
And at this point, what I think would be far more useful would be Supreme Court reform, because there's nothing about the current Supreme Court that is in the Constitution. The Supreme Court in the Constitution doesn't even have the right of judicial review. They gave that to themselves in a judicial decision called Marbury v. Madison in the early 1800s. And there's nothing that says that it has to be 9 people, and there's nothing that, I mean, this could all be changed. And to me, that would be the most profound effect on how we understand and live with our Constitution.
I think that's a good place for us to cut this off. And I asked everybody to hold applause till the end, and you mostly did, so if you want to give really forceful applause right now. Thank you so much. I don't know what your plans are for the rest of the day, but if you stand out in the lobby, I'm sure there'll be a line of people who'd like to talk to each of you.
We're still live, don't go anywhere. We're gonna get a group photo of all before you guys together. You can stay right there. Nice guys, switch hands.
Good job on the snow.
Professor.
We're trying.
Professor. Photo.
I love everyone just calls me Professor. I actually have a name. It's called Lisa.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's all right.
I apologize.
You want to come?
We're gonna get you 3 first.
Okay.
Cool. Now come on. Cool. And perfect. Thank you very much.
Right.